Good morning. I'm excited to share this message, and I'll be talking about contentment this morning. And contentment is so important. It's one of the most important things to be mindful of as Christians, and it's an important danger is not being content, despite all of the blessings that we've been given by God. And I'm just reminded of that moments ago when I was in the crying room, and Thomas and Quentin are back there, and Thomas has a big bucket of goldfish crackers, and Quentin is eyeing them and trying to teach Thomas to share willingly, and he took a great big gob of them and put the fistful in his mouth. And then he took one out and handed it to Quentin. It's like, no, that's not really how it works. So it's hard to learn, whether we're 1 or 41 or 81, to be content with what we have, and then beyond that being generous. But I think the passage that James just read for us illustrates how important it is to be content and how dangerous it is not to be content. We've heard this verse 10 many times. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. We hear that all the time. Even people outside the church, it's been rooted in. Sometimes you hear money is the root of all evil, and it's like, well, it's the love of money. But there's this other important verse, verse 9. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. We think of so many people that have run into ruin and destruction. And aside from maybe drugs or alcohol, this envy and desire to become rich and to have more stuff is probably one of the biggest causes of destruction of people and people's souls. Why do people not decide not to go to church? Or maybe because they want to work and make more money, or maybe they've decided to have more leisure time, or I don't know. But there are a lot of reasons why people have turned away from God. But I do think that envy and the temptation and the allure of physical riches is a big problem. And then at the same time, this whole passage, 1 Timothy 6, verse 6, it opens with this important truth. Godliness with contentment is great gain. This truth in Scripture, it sounds so simple. If only it was easy to apply. The previous verse says that it's those who have been robbed of the truth who think that godliness is a means to financial prosperity. I'll read that. Verse 5, that's 1 Timothy 6, verse 5. Constant friction between people and of a corrupt mind who have been robbed of the truth and who think that godliness is a means to financial gain. So maybe there are people who are part of the church, maybe that's you, who says, well, if I go to church, then, I can have more wealth. We hear about the prosperity gospel preached sometimes. But we know, and this is truth, that your salvation cannot be bought with silver or gold. It was already bought with a price, and that was Jesus on the cross. And then on the other side, and what this verse is saying is that your earthly wealth cannot be bought by you sitting in a pew every Sunday, or fasting, or having prayers, or being a religious person and doing religious things. That's not why we do these things. It's because we love Jesus. And God blesses some more than others. And He blesses those who are in the church and those who are outside the church. And we can't think of our prosperity, either wealth or our health or our safety or any of those things, as being somehow tied to the amount of churchy things that we do. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. This isn't why we're part of the church. So often, even as faithful Christians, we want more than we've been given. Maybe this is a natural tendency as humans to want more. And it's captured so perfectly, that human tendency, in raising a toddler. Because when you're 18 months old, there's very little subtlety in anything. It's like, I want more, I want it right now, give it to me right now. But we all have this inner toddler that is demanding more and more and more. And you think of the lifestyle that we enjoy in Nova Scotia. We are really blessed beyond measure with so many things, not just wealth. We have beautiful natural environments. We have lots of employment opportunities. We have housing mostly. We have access to pretty good health care. We have so many opportunities, so much wealth. I was kind of interested, and this isn't to make anyone feel bad at all, but if you have an income of $42,000 in Canadian dollars, this was a Swiss study, so you know, maybe you're a teacher or you do some office work, that puts you in the top 1% of income earners in the whole world. So when we heard about the Occupy Wall Street coming out against the 1%, I mean, I think a wide number of working people here where we live are already in this 1%. We're the evil 1%. And then you think about that, and it's like, we still want more stuff. We still want more. All the time we're thinking about how we don't quite have enough. If only I had that thing or this other thing. And I mean, we quickly understand that we cannot be satisfied by material things. We're already, many of us in this, considered to be in the top 1% of income earners in the world, of all the people on earth, and still in many situations unsatisfied. We're indeed blessed by God. We have Him to be thankful for and grateful for all of the earthly blessings that we enjoy, all of them. But many, we find ourselves enjoying some of the best the whole world can offer. Why are we still wanting more? And this, it has to do with our attitudes. We can't change, how much we have that much as our attitudes. And that's what's going to make us feel satisfied. We have it's God's will that we learn to be humble and that we also learn to serve Him. We turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Let's look at verse 9. 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. And God said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." I don't know if I get that. Yeah, 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. "My grace is sufficient for you, but my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardship, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong." So, Paul there is saying that he's kind of delighting in the weakness. He's delighting in being vulnerable and seeing God as greater than himself. Because when we desire physical things. And this was something that we looked at quite a bit in our study in the book of Ecclesiastes earlier this year with Leandrew. When we're pursuing physical things and delighting in those physical worldly things, we're really saying that, well, God, what you've given me already is insufficient. And I know better what I want, and I want these other things. It's like we're questioning God's will. But when we say we don't deserve anything, really, we deserve death. And Christ took the death on the cross, and plus he's given us all this other stuff. Plus, then we come to our God from a position of weakness and meekness. And then if we really have this idea, we don't deserve anything, so anything that we do have is a kind of a bonus. Then that attitude is what's going to create contentment. We think of ourselves as weak and not deserving as much. It's going to be easier to go without an upgrade to your gadget or a vacation when you feel like everyone else at your office is going on vacation and you feel like you deserve vacation or you deserve a new car or any other kind of earthly pleasure. When all of these things are on our minds, they weigh us down. They make us feel sad, and they take away the joy that comes with being a child of God. Because even if we do get all of those things, we'll find something else, and something else after that, and never find contentment in the world today. So we have to change direction, change our attitude. Now we're going to look at Philippians 4. And it's in Philippians 4 that Paul gives us an important tip on how we can be content no matter our circumstances. So Philippians 4, verses 10, starting in verse 10. I rejoiced greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. And that verse 13 we see plastered all over the place, don't we? It's on our Facebook posts and bumper stickers and all the things, we hear, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. How many of you knew that had to do with being content in any and every situation? So that's what Paul is talking about. Whether we're well-fed or not, or living in plenty or not, it's actually really hard to be happy, maybe in either of those situations. And we cannot do it on our own strength. That's the truth. And so we can do it through Christ who gives us strength. And that is what Paul said. That is what he did to be able to be content, maybe even when he was starving in prison or, sleeping in a ship for weeks at a time, traveling from one city to another, working for God. And we do have a command to obey and to serve God and not ourselves. Job 36:11, it says, if people obey and serve God, they will spend the rest of their days in prosperity and their years in contentment. Doesn't that sound nice? Wouldn't you love to spend your days in prosperity and contentment? And maybe a lot of people would read this verse and think, well, if I just go sit in a pew, or if I just become a Christian, then I'm going to be prosperous. Then I'm going to be content. And it's not saying you're going to be prosperous in a worldly sense, that you're automatically going to move right up into the 1% in the worldly wealth sense. But it is that we will have Christ who will help us to find contentment and to find prosperity in Him. And right after that verse, there's a warning from God that's given through Job's friend Elihu, I think is how you pronounce it. But those who do not listen, they will perish by the sword and die without knowledge. And again, this kind of jumps right into our study of Ecclesiastes. That, James taught this, or Shola, in our last class in our last class on Thursday, where it said that wealth was a kind of an okay thing according to Solomon. And wisdom was an okay thing, but if you had to pick between the two, wisdom was a lot more important. If you spend your whole life going after wealth and not wisdom, then you'll probably lack wisdom. Your soul will not be taken care of, because wisdom is Christ. Christ is wisdom. So hopefully you made it on Thursday to hear the whole part of that lesson, and if you didn't, we hope you'll join us on this coming Thursday and hear more. But let's make an effort today to find ways to make ourselves more content in our present circumstances. And no matter what God has or has not bestowed upon us, be careful not to compare yourself to other people or to view others with judgment. And we can consider the words of Philippians 2, verse 3, where it says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others to be better than yourselves." Earlier this week, and it was part of the inspiration maybe for preaching on this topic, Carrie got a journal called the Contentment Journal. It's a 90-day study through the idea of contentment. I think it's geared particularly toward ladies, but if you're interested, you could talk to her and she could show you where to get one. And maybe you're interested in making that part of your devotional time, going through 90 days of contentment journaling. But we all need to be putting God ahead of all of our other pursuits. We strive to trust in God's will and obey His commands. And we'll conclude the lesson this morning by singing 915, Trust and Obey.
Song number 915. And after this song, we'll go